Football is back tonight. We've got a tied-up series in the Fall Classic. Welcome to Fantasy Sports Today here on Sports Grid. Craig Mish, Davis Maddock, every Monday through Friday, noon to 2 Eastern here on Sports Grid, talking fantasy sports with you. Of course, a lot of decisions have to be made. It's fantasy football night. We've got the Packers. We've got the Cardinals. And Davis, it looks like we've got a compelling series in the World Series. We've got the NBA going on. We're going to get some fantasy standouts going here, too. And maybe talk about some waivers. I'm the proud owner of a Boston Scott today player in terms of fantasy here.
Yeah, it was a huge night for waivers last night, actually. I saw Trey Sermon dropped in some of my leagues, but, people had to rotate through the Patriots running backs, right? Brandon Bolden, some people, trying to pick up Ramondre Stevenson if he got dropped, J.J. Taylor. We had all the Eagles running backs, some of the Browns wide receivers. It was a pretty interesting waiver week, I thought. We have what looks to be a good series brewing for the World Series. So you always, look, we want 7 games if just for this show, right? We want to be able to talk as much baseball as we can. And the NBA has been pretty compelling. We've had at least, one really good game pretty much every night so far, which has been enjoyable.
Yeah, no, I think that the season as it goes on, we have so much to talk about here on the show. We're going to preview tonight's game as well. So let's get started with our headlines as we begin. Here on this Wednesday, the 28th of October, 2021, the Astros score 7 runs as they even up the series, tied now at 1 apiece. Looks like we're probably heading toward a 6 or 7 game series. J.J. Watt, unfortunately, his season is already over. Signed with Arizona a few games in, hurts his shoulder. He is done. I think Davis may have predicted this trade a few months ago, if I'm not mistaken. Texans trade Mark Ingram right back to the New Orleans Saints, so that's where Ingram will finish his career this year. Who knows who will run for Houston. Thunder, 26 points down yesterday, and come back and beat the Lakers 123 to 115. Wow, what a comeback that was yesterday for sure. All right, so let's hit on a couple of different things here. The trade that sent Ingram to the Saints is not important for Ingram anymore. I guess the question is, Davis, they don't score, right? Like it's almost the kind of team that you can only play Brandon Cooks, but with one less running back there in Houston, is there any chance that David Johnson or Phillip Lindsay, like I'm seeing those guys grabbed in my leagues this week?
Yeah, those guys should be picked up. Of course, the Texans, they don't really score enough points. You would basically want one of them to get whatever goal line work there is available and then also be playing the passing downs. David Johnson was already playing the passing downs. So, if they move David Johnson from like 50% of the snaps and 4 or 5 carries a game and 4 or 5 targets, and they gave him 10 to 14 carries and 5 or 7 targets, then I think he would become valuable. I actually think Mark Ingram might have a role on this Saints team, though. Because Tony Jones Jr., who was their backup running back, got injured. He got placed on the short-term IR. Alvin Kamara already has 114 carries. The most carries he's had in a season before that was he had 194 all the way back in 2018. Basically, he is going to hit his career high in carries in like 3 games. And, that's fine for how they're playing right now. But, a big surprise to me is that it looks like the Saints are drawing pretty live to make the playoffs right now. If the season ended right now, they would be in the second wild card. There's not going to be a second wild card team that comes from the NFC East. I think it's unlikely that the Vikings or Bears are going to hold up their current record. The Rams and the Cardinals are for sure going to make the playoffs, right, but the Seahawks and the 49ers are basically stone dead to make the playoffs. So if the 11 games, I think, probably gets the Saints in. And so I think they probably want to take the foot off the gas with Kamara a little bit. And that's why they made this trade, because they just needed someone who knows the offense and knows the system.
Yeah, Saints may finish 9-8 and get in the playoffs. You're right. Seattle is done. San Francisco is done. I think Minnesota still feels like a 9-8-ish, type team at the end of the season for sure. Okay, so no Devontae Adams tonight for Green Bay. No Alan Lazard tonight for Green Bay. I feel like there's like a massive overreaction in this game to that. Is Cobb somebody that you're willing to suit up tonight? Is there another receiver I'm missing? Is Valdez Scantling playing in this game tonight?
So Valdez-Scantling is back. He is expected to be activated from the designated for return IR tonight. So their 3 wide receiver set will be Randall Cobb in the slot, MVS out on one side, and then either Equanimeous St. Brown, Malik Taylor, or Amari Rodgers as the other wide receiver. And it's really anyone's guess who ends up, being that other wide receiver. I would say that if I was hit by injuries and buys, I think you can make worse starts than Randall Cobb or Marquez Valdez-Scantling in this game. One of those two guys, I think, should have a good fantasy game.
Yeah, total very high for a Thursday night game. Does that mean we'll get a lot of points? Well, can't be any worse than last Thursday's game. We can definitely agree on that. All right, coming up next, we head over to the NBA. We'll take care of our fantasy standouts here on the show. Of course, plenty to get to on the program. We'll have a full preview of tonight's game, tell you how you can play this single game slate tonight. In addition to that, a little bit later in the show, we'll talk some wide receiving duos and also some Dynasty League players that you should be targeting or maybe even selling in fantasy too. So stay on the grid with us. We're off and running here on this Thursday on Fantasy Sports Today on Sports Grid. Craig and Davis back with you in just 2 minutes as we take a look at Giannis, Jimmy Butler, and the rest of the fantasy standouts up next here on Fantasy Sports Today. Don't go away.
Great. SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Time to get to our fantasy standouts from the NBA on Wednesday night. Of course, here in South Florida, Dave, is everyone really excited with the way the Miami Heat is playing? No doubt about that. Milwaukee Bucks, on the other hand, not off to the great start. Maybe a little hangover, Davis, from the championship. I don't really know what's going on with them.
Well, to be fair to them, they are playing without Drew Holiday right now. He is banged. I believe he has an ankle injury, so they're having to rely on, Pat Connaughton and George Hill and Grayson Allen and Jordan Nwora. Definitely not guys who were, key. Well, I guess Connaughton was a key piece of them winning a championship. So, but they are, of course, a super top-heavy team. But it is odd to see, basically a team that we expected to be one of the best in the NBA losing to the Timberwolves. Like, it's the Timberwolves. Like, Giannis, bro, you got to figure it out. Like, what are we doing here? I mean, I guess if Grayson Allen is playing 30 minutes a night, what can you do? I mean, what are we expecting from them? They might be a team that would need to make some trades over the course of the season because their rotation right now is filled with lots of guys who I don't really think are NBA players.
All right, let's get into it. Let's take a look at Giannis last night. It wasn't his fault. 40 points, 16 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 blocks. Jimmy Butler with another big game, 17 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals, 1 block. Devin Booker had 31 for the Suns as they've struggled out of the gate. 31, 6, 8 steals, 8 assists, 1 steal. DeAndre Ayton with the rebounding night, monster, 21 points, 21 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, and 1 block. And the Raptors' OG Anunoby, 25 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 steals, and 1 block. So I know, Davis, that you participate in a lot of DFS action here. I guess, who did you have out of any of these in your lineup? Who were the surprises? And then what did you think about last night's fantasy standouts?
Yeah, I got to be honest. Last night's slate did not go super great for me. Mostly because I played Kevin Durant over Giannis. Kevin Durant was 2% owned last night in contest. Giannis was, I think, closer to like 35%. They were right next to each other in salary. I took that difference in ownership, and Giannis got 75 fantasy points, and Kevin Durant got like 50. So lost that one. I think the Toronto Raptors are one of the more interesting teams to look at in terms of their rotation right now. They actually DNP-CD'd Goran Dragic last night, which I do not think very many people would have expected that happening. So instead of Dragic, they are playing a guy I've literally never heard of named Delano Banton as their backup point guard. And they're just giving super heavy minutes to their starters. Anunoby, Barnes, Van Vliet, and Gary Trent Jr. all played over 35 minutes. What's one thing we really look for in fantasy? We love these teams that play the tight rotations, right? We love an 8-man rotation. We love starters getting 35 minutes. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Also, while they're waiting for Pascal Siakam to come back from injury, I mean, OG Anunoby, I would guess, I don't have his basketball reference page pulled up, but I would guess 21 field goal attempts from OG Anunoby. That's got to be a career high for him. And so he's kind of taking up that offensive mantle from Pascal Siakam, waiting for him to return from injury, which is, a pretty big deal right now.
So why did Toronto do that deal with Miami then, Davis, for Dragic? I mean, I know that, he's not the Dragic of 5 years ago, probably, but they gave Lowry to the Heat in that deal. So what did I miss there with that?
So, I mean, part of it is that they did not want to pay Kyle Lowry the salary that he would have been asking, which would have been, I mean, the deal he signed with the Heat was 3 years, $85 million. And they were able to clear some salary cap for that. They will probably be able to buy Goran Dragic out, which is going to save them even more money. They were also able to get Precious Achiuwa, who was a first-round pick only 2 years ago. And I was saying, I didn't realize that he was in that trade the other day when we were talking about him, but he was a young player. He was a young player that I really liked. Like, I thought what he put on the court in Miami was, a pretty good sample. And weirdly enough, Miami just stopped playing him last year. About halfway through the season, Achiuwa was getting DNP CDs, and they were playing I don't even remember the name of the backup center that the Heat were playing instead of him last year, but just weird that he wasn't able to get minutes. But yeah, it was just a combination of wanting to clear their decks for salary, and I think they really liked Achiuwa, as evidenced by the fact that they're starting him over Khem Birch, a guy they actually traded for last year who was playing a lot of minutes for them.
All right, let's go through some of the big questions from last night. And Davis, the Phoenix Suns have struggled out of the gate. Saw some interviews with Chris Paul. They're kind of pounding him a little bit there, asking what's going on. Same thing that's going on in Los Angeles. I think we were sort of warned about this, though, before the season. Everything that I heard was that it was going to take some time. It definitely looks that way. But the Clippers are also 1-3 to start the season. And then Minnesota has definitely been the surprise of the first week of the NBA season, Davis, with Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, and Anthony Edwards. But I guess you have to wonder, are they a true big three? It's been really hard to get behind Minnesota as any kind of playoff team that is viable since the days of Garnett and Marbury. Like, it has been that long, 20 years. So let's tackle those topics here.
All right. So first off, the Suns are probably a playoff team, but honestly, it starts to get pretty tight in the Western Conference if you really start breaking it down. Because if the Timberwolves are for real, right? If the Timberwolves are going to be a team that can contend for the play-in, I mean, there are just a lot of very good teams, right? The Jazz locked in, the Warriors way better than anyone expected thus far. They're 4-0 and they look 4-0. The Grizzlies look a little bit better. The Mavs, the Mavs I think will probably win 48 games and end up disappointing us in the end, but will be a playoff team. And we're worried a little bit about the Clippers as well, because the way this team is structured, they structured it like Kawhi Leonard is going to be able to come back and play for them this year, right? Because he's got that knee injury, but they just don't have a ton on the wings. They're having to play 2 point guard lineups, despite the fact that they don't even like any of their point guards. That's never a good sign if you're having to play 2 guys in your rotation that you are not huge fans of it. I mean, how long have we been hearing that? How long have we been hearing that the Clippers need a point guard? And guys like Justice Winslow and Luke Kennard, I mean, they're fine, but if you're losing 92-79 to the Cleveland Cavaliers, like there is something in the water there. So I will say the Phoenix Suns are a playoff team, but I don't really feel that great about it. And maybe what we're seeing here, Craig, is a shift, a balance of power into the Eastern Conference, right? Because we have the 2 teams in LA, the Lakers and the Clippers. Right. They're not playing that well. And as for the Wolves, I don't know about a true big three, because I'm not really a D'Angelo Russell guy, but I am a huge Karl-Anthony Towns guy. I think he is phenomenal, and I think he is super underrated. for a lot of factors out of his concern. And I'm also a big Anthony Edwards guy. So I think they can make the play-in. And I don't know. I mean, it's just fun to see those young guys win some games.
Yeah, look, it'd be nice to have some new teams. It's also really good to see the Warriors playing well. Maybe the Warriors jump over the Clippers and the Lakers in the regular season. Steph has just been out of his mind. So lots to talk about for sure in this NBA season, no doubt. All right, we'll get back to the NBA coming up a little bit later. We'll help you set a DFS lineup. So stay on the grid for that. But, of course, plenty Davis of football to get to tonight. Packers and Arizona Cardinals. I know that we've kind of drudged our way through some of these Thursday night games, but at least on paper tonight provides some good theater. You have Kyler Murray on one side, you have Aaron Rodgers on the other side. So we're going to break that game down for you here throughout the show, help you set a lineup, and Davis and I will each pick a top performer that we're going to put in our MVP slot over on FanDuel tonight. As a reminder, this coming Sunday and every Sunday right here on Sports Grid, we do a little show called Fantasy Sports Night, Sunday morning edition. It's 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern. It is myself, Joe Pisapia, and Matt Stryker. So if you enjoy what you see here during the week, check us out on the weekend as we help you in week 8 of the fantasy football season. We'll be back with more fantasy sports today here on Sports Grid in just 2 minutes. Don't go away.
Great.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
It's interesting that we kind of, gloss over keeper leagues and dynasty leagues in football, but every once in a while it's good to remind the people that are playing in those, that are watching Davis, that there is always hope on the other side. I know that there are some people that are probably 2-5, 1-6 in their fantasy leagues, but they're playing in a dynasty league and they're looking for some players maybe to target for the future. Maybe they're trying to win next season. And then on the flip side, you may have some really good players in dynasty that maybe you're looking at your record and it's 3-4 and you have to make some decisions on who to punt to have a future in your dynasty league. So let's talk about some potential sell high players in fantasy, and who do we lead off with today?
So I wanted to start with this, which is just that I'm in a bunch of dynasty leagues, and the reason why this is in our agenda today is that it's our trade deadline this week. So I assume that lots of people who are in dynasty leagues are in close to their trade deadline, if it's not actually this week. And, we tend to think of dynasty in two ways. Either I'm trying to win right now, or I'm trying to, sell whatever is not tied down for picks, to get into the future. And one of the things I was thinking of is kind of have some of these teams that are in the middle ground that, could trade a good asset to get a pick and another good asset. And I wanted to start with some of those examples. Our first one here is Josh Allen. And the reason why is he's kind of losing ground to the field. And, this is true for Patrick Mahomes as well, because Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are the two best quarterbacks in fantasy football. They're the two best quarterbacks in dynasty. They're going to have value for a long time. But because the quarterback position is evolving and more guys than ever are providing rushing production, we got Trevor Lawrence coming in and adding a little bit of rushing production. We have Trey Lance when he starts adding rushing production. We have Jalen Hurts, who's been a top 12 quarterback every week of this season so far. And I don't think that the dynasty trade market will be acknowledging that as much. So something like Josh Allen for Justin Herbert and a rookie second-round pick, I feel like is actually a pretty good deal for the team that's trading away Josh Allen, and could be a good deal for the team trading for Justin Herbert, if they're trying to go for a title. But the idea here is something in fantasy football that we call buying years, right? So you trade Ezekiel Elliott for Najee Harris, and you just bought a guy who's 3 years younger, right? And that's kind of the deal here with Josh Allen is you either get someone a little bit younger or someone close to him in total production, and you get a little bit of an extra asset.
So the other quarterbacks, like if we're saying that the field, like let's dive a little deeper here. So that is Kyler Murray, that is Lamar Jackson, that is Herbert, as you mentioned. Who like are there more than that, or did I just nail those and that's it?
No, I mean you're pretty close. So I would say that, and also, I mean, look, Brady's not running, but Brady is very much a part of that group because they're letting him pass so much, even when the games are out of control. So I would say for dynasty purposes right now, we're looking at Mahomes, Kyler, Lamar, Dak, Herbert, and Josh Allen as kind of like that that's the blue chip tier. But then, Brady scoring pretty close to those guys. Jalen Hurts scoring pretty close to those guys. And so, if there's a group of 10 quarterbacks, we just listed off a bunch of names who are kind of in that 19 to 22 points per game range, then it means that the points that Josh Allen is getting you are just a little bit less valuable, even if his performance itself has not changed.
Well, you're going to be on full tilt when Minshew starts next week, huh?
Oh,
are you ready
yes,
for that?
I am. No, I'm gonna have to take time off the show. It's not gonna go well.
Yeah, I think it's coming. All right, Derrick Henry, my favorite player in the NFL, helping me in fantasy, off to a great start. But let's keep it real here. Eventually, this is going to end. I don't know when. He's on pace to break the single season touch record. He's the number one pick in fantasy. Davis, he's going to be the number one overall pick next year in fantasy football, without a doubt. I mean, again, if the season ended today, he would be the number one pick overall in fantasy. He's going to be a Hall of Famer as well. Like, these are trajectories we haven't seen from a running back in a really, really long time. Like, if Terrell Davis is in the Hall of Fame, Derrick Henry's definitely in the Hall of Fame too. But 2 years ahead, 3 years ahead. I remember Larry Johnson. So do you, Davis, with the Chiefs, right? Like, won a lot of fantasy championships, and then wow, it just ended quick.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of the way I would break it down. Who's scoring more fantasy points 4 years from now? Cooper Kupp or Derrick Henry? I mean, look, I love Derrick Henry. I agree with your analysis. I think that he is a Hall of Famer, number one pick in fantasy football next year. But would I rather have CeeDee Lamb in a 2023 first-round pick than Derrick Henry? Yes. Now, I would say if I had Derrick Henry on a team that was first place in my league, looking like I'm going to win a league championship, there's not enough you could offer me to sell Derrick Henry. I would just say I'm keeping Derrick Henry. I will look at this in the offseason, right? But let's say you maybe have some bad injury luck, right? So you got George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Michael Gallup and Brandon Ayuk on your dynasty league team, and you also have Derrick Henry in your fourth place in your league, and maybe you could make some moves to start adding some guys, or you can just move laterally and say, okay, I'm going to offer Derrick Henry to the team that's first place in the league, and I'm going to offer Derrick Henry for Justin Jefferson, Rondale Moore, and a first-round pick, right? That the owner of who's receiving would be like, yeah, that sounds like a good deal. I'll get the guy who has the most amount of points. And, I will help this other guy. So I'm trying to look at some of those mutually beneficial deals like that in some of my leagues.
Sure. No, it makes sense. And again, I think that the point is that if you're in first place and you have Derrick Henry and you can win a championship in any league, you probably should be hanging on to him to win your championship. I mean, that's what you've been waiting for, I would think. Same probably goes for this season in particular with Cooper Kupp, who, boy, I just didn't see it being this good, Davis. I don't know. Like, a lot of people say that it's because he goes to breakfast with Stafford every day. I mean, I don't know. But the guy is getting targets like no one we've ever seen before. And he's going to end up at the end of the season grading out as probably the number one wide receiver in fantasy football. With Adams out this week, I think that's a certainty unless there's an injury here. But look, the future is uncertain for Kupp, no doubt. I mean, we don't know if a player can do this in back-to-back seasons. I would guess that there will be film out at some point that other teams will say, hey, we've never seen this combination before. Now we're seeing it. We're well aware of it. We have to try and stop it. But sometimes Randy Moss comes in the NFL and it never gets stopped, So what do you make of Cooper Kupp moving forward?
So I think that's the difference. Do I think Cooper Kupp is really good? Do I think he is one of the 10 most physically talented wide receivers in the NFL? Probably. I think he's pretty close. Cooper Kupp has been, very good. Though if I were to tell you that Cooper Kupp only has one 1,000-yard season in his career up to this point, would that surprise you?
Yeah, no, I feel like he's had 3.
Yeah, he's had 869 yards, 566 in a year that he got hurt, 11,061 and 974. He is his previous career high in touchdowns is 10. He already has 9 this year. He's averaging 115 yards a game. He leads the NFL in receptions, yards, and receiving touchdowns. I am basically saying I bet my bottom dollar Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, probably just those 2, but those 2 for sure are better values. I would rather have both of those guys. And when you consider in a dynasty fantasy football context, the future value of those guys, Cooper Kupp is already 28 years old. He'll be 29 next season. Well, I mean, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, 6 years younger than him, right? DJ Moore, 5 years younger than him. Jamar Chase, right? I actually think that if you were a middling team and you offered Cooper Kupp for Jamar Chase, and the Jamar Chase team was in first or second or something like that, I think you might get, I think they might accept that because they're like, look, I'm just going to get all these points this year. Stafford's under contract for 4 years. Like, it's not like this is going to be a trade that absolutely crushes me. So I think you'd get an accept, but I would rather have Jamar Chase, right? Jamar Chase is 22. Looks like, I mean, Jamar Chase, like, Guy looks absolutely unstoppable right now. But people just want these Cooper Kupp points because he's just been so phenomenal.
All right, let's close it out with tight end. This is interesting to me because of just the lack of tight ends in the NFL. And so I'd love to hear your analysis here because, yes, Travis Kelce is older. So was Antonio Gates, Davis. So was Tony Gonzalez. I mean, those guys were in the NFL and still viable in fantasy at later ages. And so, this is a tough one for me because Davis, if you trade Kelce, you're basically throwing a dart at a young tight end. And in general, I mean, they're almost impossible to find every year.
Yeah. And so Kelce would actually, of all 3 of these guys, right, these amazing fantasy players, I would be most hesitant to sell Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce is going to give you a huge package in a trade because of how scarce the tight end position is. I mean, in fantasy right now, in Dynasty, there are literally probably 2 tight ends who you are happy if you have them, Travis Kelce and Kyle Pitts. And if you have anyone else, you're probably, well, maybe if you got Waller really cheap a couple years ago, right? Yeah, if you got Waller cheap. But even Waller had the 19 target game in week 1 and has really slowed down since then. So basically, I would just, if I had Travis Kelce, I would just be taking the temperature and see what the mood was like out there for Travis Kelce.
Yeah, it's funny that if we would have had this conversation 2 years ago, who would think that we wouldn't even mention George Kittle? But let's be honest here at this point, the quarterbacking's been poor. He's been hurt. I mean, he is not in that top tier. I mean, Andrews is ahead of Kittle. I mean, it's just a fact. All right, coming up next, time for some Thursday night football preview. We'll hear from Aaron Rodgers and what a potential game plan could look for tonight with the Green Bay Packers, more running, more passing, who will get involved in that. We'll have our MVP picks over on FanDuel as well. Stay on the grid.
Great.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Welcome back. Fantasy Sports Today here on Sports Grid. For those of you who are on Twitter, on social media, here's where you follow us, at Sports Grid and at Sports Grid TV, for the latest news, notes, information, and clips, including video from around sports. Seems like anything that I say about the World Series, I got Sports Grid TV posting the video right on top of my tweet, so that's pretty cool. Follow us there at Sports Grid and at Sports Grid TV. Give us a follow right there, no doubt. All right, Thursday Night Football is upon us here. And this week, the discussion, without question, has been based around players who are not on the field as opposed to the players that are on the field. That is definitely the focus going into this Thursday night game. And so naturally, the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, who's going to be without arguably his top 2 receivers, was asked about missing his number 1 guy in Devontae Adams.
I mean, definitely gets altered for sure. He hasn't had the same type of targets as maybe the first 5 weeks, the last 2 weeks, but he's definitely a focal point of our offense. Got to find a way to get him the ball. So definitely gets altered.
Having this along with a short week, how does that kind of add to the challenge, just having not only having to adjust, but then having to adjust kind of on the fly like this?
Yeah, it's one of those weeks. Luckily, we played at noon. Coaches were in here, I think, planning till late on Sunday until late yesterday. So they put the plan in. We're going through right now, and then we got to take a trip to the other side of the country and play a great football team. So it's going to be a good challenge for us.
And Davis, a lot of folks have talked about the fact that the Packers are 6-0 without Adams, but again, that was 6-0 with Aaron Rodgers and without Adams. So when we take a look at our FanDuel tonight and try and piece a team together, before we take a look at some of the pricing and some of the players, do you think that anyone offensively outside of the running backs ends up worth starting in season long and worth playing on FanDuel tonight?
Yeah, I do think that one of Cobb or Marquez Valdes-Scantling is pretty likely to get, 5 catches, 60 yards, and some chance of a touchdown. I mean, look, Randall Cobb has been Aaron Rodgers' binky before. It's been a long time. I think it's been 3 years since they played together. But Randall Cobb was kind of Devontae Adams before Devontae Adams was there. Obviously, he was never quite as successful, but he filled that, short target, bail Aaron Rodgers out on broken plays. Like Cobb has done that. They have a good understanding. And, Valdes-Scantling is a different type of player. He really operates deep down the field, but all it takes is one with him. If on the second drive of the game, play action, Aaron Jones, the safety bites, MVS goes, Rodgers lets loose one of those beautiful rainbow balls, MVS catches it, boom, there's 70 yards and a touchdown, one play. That's all you need. And I would, if I was a betting man, I would bet that they have, at least 2 of those deep balls already drawn up and planned for MVS. I actually think this is going to be a pretty good game. I don't know for sure if it's going to go over or under, obviously, but I think Rodgers will play well, and the Cardinals have just been, they have just been unreal. They have all these weapons on offense, and I think on FanDuel we have a super interesting single game slate, because we basically can kind of do a pick 'em because there are so many cheap options who are playable, right? So it really becomes more about the game theory and how the pieces fit together.
All right, so let's take a look at tonight's single game slate over on FanDuel. We have Kyler Murray priced at $17,000, Aaron Rodgers at $15,000, Aaron Jones 12.5, DeAndre Hopkins also 12 tonight. We've got Christian Kirk at 11,000, AJ Green at 10.5, and then from there it's the guessing game. Who on offense from the Packers ends up scoring? Is it a matter of Murray spreading the ball around tonight, Davis? Does he look for Hopkins over and over again? Let's help people build the lineup here.
Well, right away, I will tell you that, Kyler Murray is going to be insanely popular in the captain, and he's going to be insanely popular for a couple reasons. The first being no one is going to want to use these Green Bay wide receivers in their MVP slot, right? No one's using Randall Cobb. No one's using MVS. No one is using Equanimeous St. Brown in the MVP. I think those guys will be, under 10% combined. Then also as kind of a corresponding result to that, people are also not going to want to use Aaron Rodgers in their MVP because the team total has dropped for the Packers. We have one of the lowest projections on Aaron Rodgers that I've seen in quite some time over on Daily Roto. And so, it's a little bit harder to, okay, I'm going to build my stack with Rodgers and the captain and a couple of his pass catchers. The 2 most popular MVPs are definitely going to be Kyler Murray and Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has these huge splits when Devontae Adams is out of the lineup. They target him like crazy. He's going to be, far and away the Packer most likely to score a touchdown or multiple touchdowns. But the other thing that feeds into this is that the target distribution for the Arizona Cardinals has been so narrow that, it's been so narrow that people they don't know who to choose, right? DeAndre Hopkins has 47 targets. Christian Kirk has 36. AJ Green has 35. Chase Edmonds has 33. And Rondale has 31 with 9 rushes. So basically every player on their team, other than Chase Edmonds, has between 35 and 45 touches on the year. You never see distributions like that. And so because people don't like to pick, it's just going to, Kyler Murray and Aaron Jones are just going to be overwhelmingly popular in the MVP slot.
What about on the tight end side with Tonyan and Ertz?
Yeah, Tonyan I think is probably my favorite play tonight because he should see a huge increase in snaps. He is we see a lot of Robert Tonyan, but we don't see him play every down. He plays about 65% of the snaps for Green Bay on average. I would be shocked tonight to see Robert Tonyan under 75%, and I think he could be 80, 85%. I think we're going to see Green Bay run lots of 2 tight end stuff, right? So we're going to have, Mercedes Lewis and Josiah DeGuara and Dominique Daphne and Tyler Davis all playing snaps out there. The Packers, by the way, this is just a funny thing about their organization. Long term, I've been doing this fantasy football stuff for a long time and working on projections. No team carries more tight ends than the Packers. I remember one showdown slate, we had to give a projection to 7 different tight ends and fullbacks for the Green Bay Packers. No one loves their beefy guys like the Green Bay Packers do, which is that's neither here nor there. It's just pretty funny. And then on the other side, Zach Ertz played 49% of the snaps in his very first game for the Cardinals. It basically came in cold, right? I think he got a couple days of practice in. I would bet that goes way up this week. I bet he's closer to 60, 65%. That's going to mean fewer snaps for Rondale Moore, who is, Rondale Moore played a season high in snaps last week, but it was just because they didn't really have a tight end. Rondale Moore is going to be the guy losing snaps to Zach Ertz in this game.
I thought Ertz played pretty well for his first game. Was shocked to see him get, I think, 10 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points last week. Okay, so now let's dive into our MVP selections for tonight, basically who we think is going to have the best fantasy day. And Davis, I'll start off. I'll go with Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. I think it's only natural to assume, 80, 90 yards rushing and a touchdown. The question is clearly going to be on the side of the receiving. I see 4 or 5 receptions and another 50 yards here. So I'm going to predict somewhere close to 100 yards rushing for Jones, a touchdown, and then another 4 or 5 catches for 50 yards. I'll go with Aaron Jones in my MVP slot tonight. How about you?
Yeah, Aaron Jones. I think on the balance of probability, Aaron Jones is the player who's most likely to end up being the correct MVP. I think 150 scrimmage yards, a touchdown, 4 or 5 receptions. I don't see any way Green Bay wins this game or remains competitive in this game without Aaron Jones touching the ball 18 times at an absolute minimum. Probably, if they win, probably even more than that. And it was week 1 or week 2 where Aaron Jones had the 3 touchdown game. We know Aaron Jones can do this stuff. He is super talented. He is a great rusher. He also is a great receiver. I misspoke. It was 4 touchdowns against the Detroit Lions that Aaron Jones had. So clearly he is a great MVP selection. My guy is going to be Christian Kirk, mostly because I don't expect him to be tremendously popular, and he has shown a ton of upside per game that Rondale Moore and AJ Green have not. So each of Rondale Moore and AJ Green have had one big game. So Rondale had his game against the Minnesota Vikings. It was, I think, 115 yards and a touchdown. AJ Green had his one big game of 100 yards and a touchdown, but they've each only had one big game. Kirk had an explosion game the first week of the season, 5 receptions, 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns, had 7 for 104 against Jacksonville, scored a touchdown against Cleveland, scored a touchdown against Houston. He is basically, how long have we been waiting on Christian Kirk to do something? His whole career, it feels like. He's finally doing something. And I feel like we're kind of looking the gift horse in the mouth. We all loved Christian Kirk for years. And now that Rondale Moore is there, it's Christian Kirk is the dusty old veteran that we can't wait for him to go away so that Rondale can play the snaps. But for once, I'm going to like the older guy instead of the younger guy. And I'm going to be pretty heavy on Christian Kirk tonight.
That's like a miracle for Davis to pick that. Can you imagine if Hopkins didn't play in a game, what Kirk would do? My gosh, him and Moore playing. Oh my God. Okay, so real quick practice report update, Davis. We'll touch on this a little bit more tomorrow, but the Giants today at their non-practice for Barkley, non-practice for Kadarius Toney, non-practice for Kenny Golladay, and they still, with all of those players out, were able to beat Carolina last week. I know they're a big underdog, Davis, on Monday night. This is like your whole season Monday night, right? Like Chiefs Giants. If the Chiefs lose this game, man, like oof.
I can't even talk about it. I mean, if the Chiefs lose this game to the New York Giants, like that's it. Like I'm not even gonna be a pretend Chiefs fan anymore. I'm just gonna wait. I'm gonna sit out the rest of the season from caring about the results of the Kansas City Chiefs playing football games. What's weird though is Barkley, Golladay, and Toney were supposed to come back, and they were expected to actually be able to at least like run on the side on Wednesday. And people were saying like, oh, this is like a good thing for Daniel Jones. Mm-hmm. This is a good thing for the Giants. So I wonder what happened with that messaging in between Wednesday and Thursday, because I distinctly remember, people were getting excited about those guys coming back. I guess, at the very least, it does sound like Sterling Shepard will be back. So at least they're not going to, Dante Pettis had the good game last week, but Dante Pettis is not going to be in the slot this week for the New York Giants. I think their 3 wide receiver set will be Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, and Colin Johnson. But I don't know, maybe Pettis has played well enough the last 2 weeks that they move Sterling Shepard outside and play Pettis out of the slot. I mean, weirder things have happened.
Is Golladay the worst signing of the offseason in the NFL?
Got to be, right? 4 years, $72 million for a guy who, he was injured last year. And clearly, I think the thing with Golladay is he just doesn't like playing for losing teams. So if he's not feeling 100% and his team sucks, I think he just is like, oh, I'm not going to play. I'm just going to chill.
Yeah, really, really rough scene for the Giants. But Giants season can look a lot different if they beat the Chiefs on Monday night. Who would have even thought we'd have that conversation at this point of the season? All right, well, we'll take a quick break here on Fantasy Sports Today. We'll wrap up our first hour. For those of you leaving us, check us out over on our YouTube channel. For those of you staying with us, more fantasy football discussion to come. Stay on the grid. Great.
SportsGrid.com. Betting insights and entertainment at your fingertips 24/7 as our team covers the most important topics in sports wagering. Real-time odds, predictive betting models, expert picks, and more. Want the edge? Then get on the grid. SportsGrid.com.
Welcome back, Fantasy Sports Today. Davis Maddock, Craig Mish with you here till 2 o'clock Eastern. Chris has the update top of the hour. Davis, Astros got back at it last night. We knew this is going to happen. It's going to happen again. In some game, Houston's going to score like 15 runs. Any changing of your opinion of this series? We're tied at 1, goes back to Atlanta tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion was that the Houston Astros are the better team, so not particularly surprising. I think in the end, what we saw happen in that game last night, which is just, it's like 1 through 7. 1 through 7, you're pretty much terrible.
Okay, we lost Davis there for a second. Yeah, well, they're going to go coming up tomorrow night. It's going to be Game 3 in Atlanta between the Astros and Braves, so we'll look forward to that game as well. No doubt that the interest in this series is what can the Braves do in Game 6 and Game 7 without Charlie Morton being available for them, the guy who closed out the World Series a couple of years ago for the Houston Astros when he came in out of the bullpen and ended up being one of the MVPs of that league that season. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll see if we can get Davis back here at the top of the hour. We've got Chris's update. We're going to cover a number of different topics in this hour of the show. One of them includes the top wide receiver fantasy football duos in 2021. These are two players that you can have potentially both playing each week for you in fantasy football. Of course, we have Fantasy Reality and the Sports Grid 60. And also, don't forget, you can catch myself, Joe Pizzapia, and Matt Stryker back this Sunday morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern for another edition of Fantasy Sports Today. Here on Sports Grid, 18 hours of live programming, including In-Play Live, weekend coverage of both college and pro football. And that extends, of course, to tonight's game between the Cardinals and Packers. So those of you who are going to watch tonight's game, they want to put a little second screen up and catch us in our analysis, tell you who to bet on during the game, props, and everything else. We'll be back with more FST right after the break. Stay on the grid.
Break.